Right, where were we?
I think I said, David,
Jared!
hey,
Hey.
long time no drink.
Yeah. So let's cut right to it. It's been a pretty big week in American history. I don't think is an exaggeration to say. It's been kind of major.
Yeah,
Um but it seems like that week is now kind of resolving itself.
yeah. I think resolving is the right way to put it. We're not we're not there yet, but I think it's pretty clear where it's headed. And I will not pretend like I'm upset about it.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on what's gone down? What was your experience of this week as an American?
Well, like a lot of people, I was glued to the TV from Tuesday evening through today. Really, it as expected was different than any previous election I'd ever seen, for a variety of reasons. Not least of which the candidates that were involved, but obviously the pandemic and what that meant for how we all voted or didn't
Yeah.
vote, um, and of course how it was all tallied, which has been the subject for the last handful of days. Um, it, it I don't know how it was reported over there. I know over here, and Claire and I were kind of bouncing around between all of the news networks, just to try to see how everybody was calling
Yeah.
it. Um, and for the most part, throughout election night, they were incredibly clear as to what they expected to happen, and really before election night ever even happened, which was chances are we're not going to know a lot tonight.
Yeah.
um, which we all kind of knew going into it. They all also kind of predicted and said, be prepared to see what a lot of them called like a red wave or a red mirage, because for the most part, not all states, but most states were counting day of
Yeah.
votes first, and then they would get to early voting and mail-in and absentee ballots, all of which were there for the most part already, many of which were there before day of voting, obviously,
Yeah.
but the sequence that they had it. And I think it's important to note too that that's not new either. That's how it's been forever.
Yeah.
They will tally them the day of first, and then they'll get to mail in and absentee. The difference, of course, being in previous years, the mail in and absentee and early voting numbers were so much smaller that they
Yeah.
were almost insignificant as far as calling the race. So I think a lot
Yeah.
of people were used to kind of getting an answer, with just the day of voting, on its own. This year
And
was
and
not.
you then also add to that the fact that this time early voting's obviously been amplified by the pandemic, but also it's become a partisan issue. You had one candidate
Yeah,
encouraging people to vote not in person for safety reasons, and the other side saying, yeah, mail voting is the devil, and so
yeah.
and so and so essentially what you get is this real sort of skewing in who's got the mail-in ballots and who's got the in-person vote.
Exactly. Yeah, and historically speaking, more Democrats voted by mail already
Yeah.
anyway. Obviously, like you just said, with President Trump urging people to not trust mail-in
Mm.
voting, it's not a big surprise that then he didn't get very many mail-in votes.
Yeah.
What is, again, not a surprise, but I find quite funny is that he was then saying, "Well, how come all of these mail-in votes are heavily in Joe Biden's favor?" Real hard to figure that one out, Donnie.
So I mean, it appears clear from from your comments that clearly you were uh, wanting Biden to win this, because
Yeah,
you can't, you have to. I mean, for me, coming from the perspective that I come from, it would surprise nobody to learn that similarly, I was not that it's any of my business who runs your country, but like, I'm very glad that
Yeah.
that Mr. Trump is not going to have the gig any longer. But living as you do in Tennessee, which went big for Trump,
Oh yeah.
you must know a whole bunch of people who were Trump voters, I would guess.
Um, Not as many in Tennessee, to be honest with you, because most of the people that I know here are musicians or
Right.
somehow affiliated with the arts, which typically speaking wouldn't fall on that side.
Even in
Um,
Nashville, where there's a whole kind of like, I,
there's
I sort of have this sort of feeling about sort of that there's this sort of flag waving country Nashville
there
pop
is
country thing that makes me, I imagine, would go big for Trump.
there very much is. I just
That's not your
don't know,
demographic.
I don't know or hang out with those people.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, okay.
not simply because of who they might vote for, but we're just in different worlds.
Yeah,
The pop country world has nothing to do with the kind of music that you and I make, and
yeah,
so our paths just don't really cross.
sure.
But don't forget, I'm from Texas.
Yeah,
I definitely do know people who would have voted for Trump, and I do think that it's important to note that the 71 million plus people that voted for Donald Trump, a huge portion of them are good people, are decent people. They're not stupid. They're not racist. They just happen to politically believe in what the Republican Party believes.
mm.
Um, and so it's easy to see how a lot of those people would still just go ahead and vote for him.
Yeah,
For me personally, and you and I have talked about this before, I think similarly to you, I do not pledge allegiance to either side. If I'm going to pick a side, it's the staunchly independent side. There are things that I like from each party and loathe from each party. But in this particular election, it had virtually nothing to do with policy. It had everything to do with character and integrity and the kind of person that was the face and voice of our nation, and the example that it sets, not only for the world watching and the perception that they're going to have from that, but also, like young people in our country looking up to whoever is in our highest position and seeing their behavior and saying, "Oh, well, that's okay. That's how you act. That's an acceptable way to conduct yourself." And with Donald Trump, I don't know how this is controversial at all personally, but I cannot condone his actions or his words or his tweets. And I know just from growing up, like everything that this guy does is completely counter to how I was brought up. Like if I did any number of the things that he does or says or tweets on a daily basis, my parents would have been horrified. My friends would have disowned me. I would have lost jobs, because it's just not how we as a society are supposed to carry ourselves. And I can't help but think that if you were to separate the person from the political side of it, it would be a near unanimous agreement on that.
Yeah. So really, the issue was him getting on the Republican ticket in the first place, because then it meant sort of half the country, or nearly half the country, was felt sort of hamstrung to fall in line. It's one of the strange quirks of the way that you're. Yes, okay, this is a criticism, but it's not a criticism like from someone say, "Oh, our electoral system is perfect. Ours is a fucking disgrace. Our electoral system is ridiculous. Yours is similarly ridiculous in many ways. Like, the electoral college is. I understand what it was for in the beginning. Yeah. I'm not so sure it makes sense in the 21st century.
No,
especially given the potential for the disparity between the popular vote and the electoral college. I mean, if they were, always a pretty good reflection of each other. You would kind of go, well, it's clearly it works. But
Yeah.
in the last few elections, there's been at least a couple where the popular vote has not carried the presidency.
Yeah, that's it. And unless I'm mistaken, I think for the bulk of our history, it has kind of worked out that way, where whoever won the popular vote also won the electoral college, with a few instances in the 1800s where that wasn't the case, and then all the way up until George W. Bush versus Al Gore, and then obviously with Trump last go around. Those were the ones that didn't go that way. So you could argue that, well, okay, maybe it does work aside from a couple of rare occasions, or you could look at it and say, well, actually now you're seeing a trend in present day America where it is fairly common. Who knows?
It skews Republican as well. Like,
it does, yeah. I think it's important to note that in both of those times it went.
But I think that's because it essentially overly weights the votes of Middle America above the largely populated left and right banks, kind of deliberately. But at the same time, that is saying that your vote counts for more if you live in Wyoming than it does in California, say.
Yeah.
Just because of the way that it's weighted, and that in itself seems like that shouldn't really be possible. And certainly, if and every time there is an election, it always seems to come down to a couple of states where, if you live in that swing state, your vote is just straight up worth more than someone else's. Whereas if you had a popular vote nationwide, everyone's vote is worth the same. And maybe campaigning looks different. But nowadays, campaigns all done on like media and internet anyway. So you're just as reachable as if you're in the tip of Maine as if you live on the tip of Manhattan. It's
absolutely, yeah. Although that's an entirely different story. I mean, I think campaigns should look drastically different, and the amount of money being poured in should be drastically different.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember how many billions they said this election cost, like in campaigns. It's grotesque. It's grotesque in a country where actual poverty exists, that you can spend that much money on an election campaign.
Yeah, that's it. If that money was actually put toward achieving anything, imagine what could be done.
Because I mean, this money is gone. What I mean, I suppose TV networks have got really well paid for the ads, and I suppose advertising executives did really well out of it, but really that money has just gone down the toilet.
Yeah.
It's so interesting as a foreigner to look at America and how it does things. And the two-party system is tricky.
Yeah.
And just how people align themselves and how angry and hysterical this process has been, like to what I imagine is unprecedented since the Civil War. Just the level of, I mean, that there was a lot of fear that it would actually boil over. I don't know if this is a regular occurrence. I don't remember hearing it in previous US elections, but like cities like boarding up their city centres, just preparing for some kind of street violence.
In my lifetime, that's never happened, and thankfully, thus far, we haven't seen it, which is a good thing. But the fact that they expected it is pretty telling, and it just speaks to the way that Donald Trump has conducted himself, and whether you agree with Republican policies or not, I think if you take the time to watch interviews with him, or watch his speeches, or read his tweets, not take on anyone else's commentary, but just listen to his own words. He is a very divisive person, and it's very purposeful. Every opportunity he gets, he tries to amplify the things that we differ on, rather than focus on how actually close we really are on everything. And he, to his credit, in a weird way, he's really good at it. Like he is a master at doing that.
Is that what you think is going on? Like I've this whole time I've been really, I've been confused, because I find whenever I see him and I hear him speak, he comes across to me as someone who is I don't know the nice way to say it, but certainly not intellectually gifted, like someone who just isn't particularly bright. Like he seems like he's. I don't know whether I view his entire rise and presidency as some just very freakish act of luck.
Mm.
Have you seen the Peter Sellers film Being There?
No.
It's about this he's a gardener, and he's not particularly bright, but just like through a series of freak occurrences, he accidentally finds himself, a very influential person in powerful circles, and he mostly does it by not really saying anything. Like people ask him for his advice, and he just sort of says a couple of vague words, and they think he's a genius. And it's a little bit like that, except that he just says loads and loads of stuff, and people sort of project. I don't know what people were projecting onto it. I can only assume that it was some kind of Emperor's New Clothes thing, whereby somehow there was enough of a constituency to get him the Republican ticket, and then because he was the anointed Republican one, people would then filter his words into some way that they would project truth and wisdom onto what he said.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could be wrong. He might be a genius, but I only ever heard him speak, or heard his responses to things as being the utterings of a very feeble-minded individual.
Yeah. You will not ever catch me arguing that he is an intelligent person. That's not going to happen.
But this idea that he's some puppet master and he's so good at manipulating things, I sort of can't even get my head around the idea that he's that coherent, that he even is reading the situation that well. And maybe I'm wrong, because he became the president, for Christ's sake. Like you surely can't do that by accident. He's such an enigma to me. I wish I could not think about it so much, but
don't we all?
Yeah, it's just bizarre to me how, like, I thought George W. Bush was just the most bafflingly unimpressive public speaker I'd ever seen. I thought, how is this man the president? I mean, he seems like Oscar Wilde right now.
Yeah, he seems like a poet.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, his occasional like gaffes are utterly excusable, because you know what he's saying. He may not have actually said the words he meant to say.
Yeah.
But the gist is there. When he says, people working hard to put food on their family, it's like, it's funny, but you know what he means, and that's fine. And it's like, and the sentiment is okay, and he's sort of on message. The words he's saying are a bit wacky.
Yeah.
But this guy, yeah. Anyway,
well,
to contrast that, I do. It's a shame to me that Joe Biden is as old as he is, because he's really, really old, and maybe he's not as sharp as he used to be. But I feel like his character is. Maybe this is the wrong word to use, unimpeachable.
We've just missed that, we've missed that kind of integrity. And watching the speeches last night, I guess we should tell people today's Sunday, the 8th, because you won't see this today. But watching the two speeches with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden last night, it was such a breath of fresh air, remembering what it's like to have Granted, he's not president, she is not vice president yet, but to have the person in that role on your TV screen, saying things that bring people together. And, there was not, in his speech and in Kamala's speech, there was not a hint of nastiness or name calling or gloating or bragging, or trying to make the divide even larger. There's none of that. All it was saying, let's move together as a country. Obviously, it's naive to think that it's going to be that easy, but you should at least have the person that's in that office trying for that, and man, it felt good to hear that. And again, this is coming from someone who's not a Democrat. I have voted both ways in elections in my lifetime, and there's a chance that I will vote both ways again. But once again, for me, it comes down to having a decent human being first and foremost, Well, and if there's an election where there are two decent human beings running against each other, then by all means, vote along your desired party lines should you have them. But that has to take precedence, I think.
In many ways, that I feel like that is the role of president. I almost feel like the job of president is sort of partway between like prime minister and monarch, as far as we would see it. Because you're the head of state, some national figurehead, and obviously that brings with it the sort of the ceremonial trappings. You're there to represent on the international stage.
Yeah.
But also, I think that my understanding is what the president does is they kind of set the tone in a strange sort of way. That isn't in the Constitution, or it's not in the way that your politics is assembled. But there's just something that flows from the presidency. This idea that somebody is not even in charge, but somebody's representing you. There's like the spirit of what America is, and for the most part, I feel like people have mostly got that.
Yeah.
And regardless of the politics of left or right and the ever widening chasm between the two, I thought that Clinton, for all his many flaws, George W. Bush, for all his many flaws, Reagan certainly, Obama, I'm a big fan. There was at least something about them as representative of the country that like them or hate them, they did.
Yeah.
I don't feel Trump ever represented an America that I recognize as I've said before, as someone who has a deep love and affection for the United States. Like that's not anything I've ever seen.
Yeah. I think it's important to remember that the people that have voted for him, by and large, are good people, and it's not that they support racism or that they support bigotry or sticking it to the poor even more than they already got it. That's not what it's about for them. But I also think it's a healthy exercise for everyone, if you aren't already sure, to maybe just take some excerpts of his speeches or tweets and then think, well, how would I feel if my neighbor said this? Or how would I feel if, the pastor at my church said this, or my best friend said this, or the school teacher? Chances are you'd say, they're out of here. I've got nothing to do with you anymore. And I just personally, anyway, couldn't possibly just look past all of that.
Yeah.
I totally get it that a lot of people were saying, I don't like Donald Trump. However, these policies I support. I get that. That's fine. For me personally, it went beyond that this time. And I think it's important too to note that in the last day and a half, I've gotten so many messages from people in other countries, mostly across Europe, who are also breathing a sigh of relief, and not out of any, thought that somehow we impact the world in a greater way than we really do. But what our president does and says, and what our country does and says, is felt all around the world. And and it's nice to feel like you have, or will feel like you will have, a decent human being again, who is representing you.
Yeah, most certainly the American influence is definitely felt over here. Certainly, we're definitely we're not an insignificant country, but it does sometimes feel like we are in the orbit of the United States. And yeah, it feels like a great relief. And I'm not saying this as like, oh, it's great to have a Democrat over a Republican. It's just like that man.
Yeah.
And as I said before, like it appears that the more I dig into like who is Joe Biden, the more he seems like a very, very decent guy. The fact that he was very good friends with John McCain, and his supposed opponent in the Senate from the other side, I think sort of speaks volumes. And
by all accounts, he is a good person, a reasonable person. I've seen a lot of high-profile Republicans say exactly that, and that while they didn't want the election to go that way, they do feel like if anyone is going to be willing to try to reach across the aisle, it's going to be him. I don't think anyone out there views Joe Biden as some kind of presidential savior, or that he's going to somehow be like the greatest president in United States history. I think he is a good choice for the current time because he is, at least up to this point, doing his best to unify. And I think that's important. But it was also such a low bar.
I honestly, I figure you could walk down any street in America and just go, you are president, and you'd get someone of a superior character. You'd get a more decent human being than the guy who's in the office. But here's the thing. Obviously, we're all, I say we're all, like you and I and people we know are all really happy.
Yeah.
The Trump's out, Biden's in. That's great and everything. But it was a very, very close run thing. But for a few little twists here and there, it was basically one news story away from going the other way, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
In the same way that the 2016 election, like as soon as Hillary's emails, as soon as James Comey dropped that bombshell in October, like maybe that's all it took.
Well, you say it's one news story away from going the other way. One news story, if it were going against Joe Biden, I think we've seen in the last 5 years, there's not a single news story that could possibly come out that will hurt Donald Trump politically, which is baffling. Like, of all of the things that he has done and all of the lies that he's told and all of the just awful stomach churning things that he has done in his lifetime, it didn't seem to matter. Like they would have sunk anyone else.
So here's the thing regarding that, because it was a close run thing, and because of all the shit that he did, going back to the pussy grabbing. I would have called it a scandal, but it seemed to just go off and water off duck's back. Yeah. But given all the controversies and the things that he did and said, what happens to his significant, large, and thoroughly committed fan base, I suppose you call it, of the people who loved him and were militantly, aggressively supportive of him, like what happens to them? Because I mean, do they just become regular Republicans? Also, what happens to his sycophants in Lindsey Graham,
Mm-hmm.
Ted Cruz, who was like suddenly seemed to be his his greatest champion after being told that his dad killed JFK. I mean, like, I don't know how these people can go back to work with any kind of credibility. Like, does Trump remain? Like, basically, does he run at the next election? Is he still? What does he do? What do
I
his
mean,
supporters do? What do his sycophants in the Republican Party do? How does the Republican Party move on from Trump and the shadow that he casts? They surely can't sort
yeah,
of continue. The head has been cut off the beast, but the beast then just grows another head, and like I don't know, Mitch McConnell just carries on the Trump train. Like, what the fuck happens now? It's so interesting and scary.
scary. Yeah. Well, I mean, the short answer is who knows. But what I mean, you asked a lot of questions there.
I did. I asked. I mean,
I
I wasn't really wanting you to answer them. I'm just
Yeah.
sort of freaking out. Like, what happens? Because essentially, it seems like in the last not very many years, like the party that's been like established for such a long time and was pretty much on its own track,
Mhm.
suddenly got sort of hijacked and taken off in some other weird, wacky direction. Because the crazy thing about Trump is he wasn't really a Republican.
No,
Like
and they all loathed him. In
yeah,
2016, before he was their man, none of them wanted him. You know, Ted Cruz is a great example of that. What I think and hope will happen is that aside from a few key people, Cruz probably being one of them, that a lot of Republicans will start kind of distancing themselves from him. Um,
yeah,
because
you'd
because
expect that.
they're all going to be ambitious and want their careers to move on as well.
But how is that going to look? I mean, how can you do that with any credibility?
Well, I mean, come on.
Having said like, oh no, I'm firmly behind the president 100%. I mean,
Politician 101, man. Like, that's not going to matter. They're just going to all of a sudden move and say, oh, no, I don't support that anymore. That's a, traditional politician move. And I think we're going to see it. And plenty of people will try to call them out on it, and it probably won't matter.
I mean, I'm biased. I come to this with a bias, and I'm aware that I have a bias, and I try not, or at least I try to be aware of my bias and sort of adjust for it. When it comes to particularly in America, because it's not my place to have an opinion. Like, you guys do whatever you want. I don't get a vote. It's not up to me. I'm not an American.
Yeah.
But it really does seem like being a Republican is pretty fucking easy, because like what we said about Trump is like he could do whatever the hell he wanted, and just because he's wearing that badge and flying that flag, he's got that support. And I feel like that's the case with these people like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell. These I mean, the fucking nonsense about that Supreme Court nomination with Coney Barrett recently. You go back and when Obama was trying to get his guy in, 9 months before the election, and they were
Yeah.
like, oh no, we can't do this so close to an election. They got that woman through like a week
Yeah.
before the election,
And
and,
to
and
be,
like grinning
yeah,
about the hypocrisy of what they said previously. Now, I don't really care, and I understand that
yeah,
political expediency is a thing, and that you have an opportunity, you take your opportunity. But it's like at some point, like you said that, and you said that hand wringing sincerity. That, oh no, we couldn't possibly. The precedent has been set that we don't ever confirm a judge in an election year, and then you just fucking laughed at it. It's
yeah.
like at some point, does that lack of integrity not cost you?
I don't think it will, to be honest.
It doesn't. No, I will answer my own question. It doesn't. It doesn't come back
Yeah.
because you're a fucking Republican. And the people who vote Republican will always vote Republican because actually they don't care because what you've done there isn't what they've done isn't disingenuous. They've been doing the right thing if you're that way inclined. And I don't know if that's a difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. I'm not, you know,
I suspect that that if the tables were turned, Democrats would have done a very similar thing. I have no doubt that they would. But we don't know that because the tables weren't turned. And obviously what happened with Amy Coney Barrett, they had every right to do it. It just goes back to, 2016, I guess it was, when they were going to try to get Merrick Garland through. They should have been able to do that. That's the difference. Obama should have been able to choose his, and Trump should have been able to choose his, and that should have been that.
But for me, having said that before,
I know. Yeah, it's
like there's that thing of Lindsey Graham saying, "Seriously, use my words against me. If this happens next time, remind me of this conversation. Tell me that I'm a hypocrite." And it's like he just sort of like giggled it off. I kind of feel like that should be a career-ending display of weak integrity. I don't care who does it or what side you're on. It's like your words got to count for something, surely.
Yeah. It certainly should. It won't, but it certainly should. Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I know very little about politics, but
me too. I mean, yeah.
But again, this has nothing to do with politics.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with not being an asshole.
Yeah.
Not being just a really, really, really bad person.
Do you know what I love? I absolutely love. Just like one of my favorite things is good sportsmanship.
Mm-hmm.
And when people do something like noble and honourable, and of course it will come as no surprise to learn that my idea of Donald Trump is he's never done anything honourable or sportsmanlike in his entire life. He doesn't understand that level of nobility. But throughout, this is one of the things I've been sort of looking up. American history and presidential politics is littered with these examples of great sportsmanship, be it John McCain's concession speech. That note, have you heard about the note that George H.W. Bush left for Clinton in the White House?
Yeah.
Basically saying, like, you're my president now, and I'm really rooting for you, and don't take criticism hard. Like genuine, like warm, heartfelt comradeship.
Yeah.
And things like that really warm the heart. To learn that these people who had been in the heat of battle could ultimately have that sort of respect and humility and honor about them. And I really hope that whatever happens in the future, at least on a presidential level, you now have someone, or will have someone in the office who's worthy of those principles.
Yeah.
The thing you hear a lot is this talk of radical socialism, which it's such an easy and a lazy thing to kind of say. Do you want these radical socialists like taking all your stuff? And
it's all fear based and
the fear's very
fear. They're crying socialism because they know that the dirty S word will freak a bunch of people out.
Yeah.
And calling people radical left that really, if you look at them, well, they're not. Like there are radicals on both sides for sure.
I mean, Joe Biden is about as vanilla.
I mean,
moderate.
But that side, the far right, know that if they label someone as such,
Mm.
enough people aren't going to bother to look into it. And obviously, people do that on the Democratic side too, and will label people crazy right wingers and just assume that they're all gun-toting racist assholes, and they aren't.
Yeah.
And that is a huge part of the problem. Is the assumption is if you are on one side or the other, you are at the extreme of that side, and most people aren't like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the crux of the dysfunction that gripped America in the recent time, is that the vast majority of Americans are somewhere in the middle,
Yeah,
and
and all,
they're sensible, rational people.
yeah,
But the conversation has been dominated by these hysterical
mm,
voices, and by this the slinging of mud. The conversation hasn't been happening. It's been like just screaming across a huge void, whereas in
yeah,
actual fact there are conversations to be had, and there are compromises to be made. And
sure,
compromise is not a dirty word, and compromise is not a weakness. Compromise is a strength. But we've got to a stage, and it's the same in the US as it is in the UK. In order to get anything done, you need a full lock. You need to have a president, and you need to have a Senate and a House that are all on the same team, and then you can do things. And if you don't have that, you can't get anything done,
yeah.
because this sort of level of partisanship and the hysteria and the automatic naysaying of anything your opponent suggests.
And in a lot of ways, I think a split government is a good thing, because personally, I don't want either side to get everything that they want. That's not healthy. But what I hope is that we can get back to, at least, like you say, people compromising and each side getting a little bit of what they want, and then maybe as a society we can inch forward.
Well, I mean, I hope so, but my fear is that Mr. McConnell's going to get his big red pen out like he did for the Obama presidency and just say no to everything, whether he's read it or not.
I hope not. I wouldn't be surprised, but I hope not. Who knows?
My understanding is that at least he and Joe Biden do have a
Yeah,
relationship and a past and a some sort of comradely friendship that means maybe there is some bipartisan way. One can only be hopeful, but
mm,
one hopes that the last 4 years has been an anomaly and hasn't just exposed some of the fundamental flaws in, I suppose, I guess the problems and cracks that nobody saw previously in what is a very impressive system of checks and balances for a system that was brought about 250 years ago, that's held this far. My fear is that actually the weaknesses have been exposed, and the cracks will get wider, and you'll be in a position where and I say this again, fully on the understanding that my country is in a similar position. We have an archaic political system that was devised, generations ago, before anything that might be considered a modern age, and my concern is that it's not fit for purpose anymore, and that there's no way of changing it. Because in order to change it, you've got to change it from the inside. In order to get inside, you've got to essentially be invested in the status quo. So, I mean, how do you change a 200-year-old political system
well,
where nobody who has the power to change it has the interest to change it?
sure. I don't think that will happen. I also think and hope that those cracks were always there. They were always visible. I maybe I'm giving too much credit to the people who have held this office before, but I think a lot of them were smart enough to see where they could exploit those cracks. They just had enough integrity not to, and that's what I'm hoping will happen moving forward.
Yeah.
That if you have someone who has enough character who is in the office, they're gonna, for the most part, do the right thing. That's what we've got to hope for.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, I feel like the more I think about it, and the more that I understand about Joe Biden, he seems like about the perfect president for this moment.
Yeah.
Especially given that he's likely to be a one-term president, like voluntarily, because he's going to be like
Yeah.
80s.
I would be shocked if he ran for re-election
next time out. So, and whether the idea is to groom Harris for the top job, which I don't know a great deal about her, but she seems like a very impressive individual.
She does. Yeah, absolutely.
It would be great to have a woman president. I think it would do wonders.
I mean, I think it's long overdue in our country. Plenty of other developed countries have gotten there long before we have. Obviously, yeah, pretty much all of them. Obviously, you don't want to do it just to do it, to have the token person in office. But by all indications thus far, I don't think that she is just a token woman who is now in that position. She seems brilliant and strong-willed, and again, like a good person. Obviously, we'll know more in the next handful of years. But whether it's her or someone else, whether it's 2024 or down the line, I'm hopeful that we'll get there soon, because I do think it's important. But what do I know?
Yeah. It would be so nice if there was if everyone just could calm the fuck down, It's been fraught, it's been fraught and hysterical for seeming like every day, every couple of days or whatever, there would be some like insane thing coming out of the White House.
This is the conversation that I've had with a lot of people, family members included, is that among other things, this presidency has been exhausting. It's been absolutely exhausting. And I would love to return to the day when you kind of just forget that there even is a president, aside from a handful of
goes by.
a year.
A month goes by, and like you haven't even heard of anything that Joe Biden's done. You'd be like,
you don't need your country's leader to be on your screen and in your ear every single day. You don't need that. We don't need that. And I think if we somehow can manage for that to happen moving forward, I think everybody's going to probably say, "Oh man, this is kind of nice,"
like we can do other things. We can have other interests. Like we can turn on the TV and there's like, oh, there's a documentary about salmon. How interesting.
Great. I can go about my life and not have to care as much about who is currently in office.
Yeah, that would be nice. And hopefully in the years to come, maybe, like I say, the American influence on the UK is palpable. Maybe we'll get rid of our embarrassing, strange-haired buffoon.
Well, hey, if we can do it, you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know who we have waiting in the wings who's any better, but
Oh well.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. There's like an hour-long political commentary from two people. Very, very little about politics, but I would argue that we're fairly decent judge of character, and that's what it's really all about.
I've got to say though, it is. It's been really. I've loved. I don't know what's. We haven't even talked about what we're drinking.
Well, here's what I was drinking. It's called. I think they call it High Ally. It's another IPA. This one from Cigar City Brewing Company, which is from Tampa, Florida.
Oh, nice.
So there you go.
Cigar City. Nice, interesting. Okay, this is a sorcery session IPA. Yeah, tastes nice.
Good.
And before that, I was drinking the BrewDog Hazy Jane,
Oh,
which
I haven't tried that one. What's the story on that one?
it's a New England IPA, and as such has that delicious, what I have previously described as cat urine quality to it, but which I should again reiterate, I find very pleasant indeed. So, not cat urine, just that sort of that quality, kind of
Yeah.
tart, but fresh and citrusy, delicious.
Pungent.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Anyway, I was saying it's been really enjoyable on the footage. Just whenever they in the news want to talk about the American election, they for the past few days they always go to footage of people dancing in the streets of Philadelphia, which always brings me a certain joy, as that is my adopted hometown, and I love and miss it very much. So it's nice to get a bit of Philly on the TV.
Yeah, it's yesterday was and today was pretty incredible to see the response. Not only around all of the cities, major cities in the U.S., but around the world, people were celebrating
Yeah,
in a way that, to be honest, I can't remember from any presidential election, even Barack Obama, I mean, where there were massive celebrations and rightfully so. Um, this one feels different, you know. It feels like an old friend has come back home.
or I was going to say it's like the Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead.
Ding Dong is dead. Yeah, it's a bit of both.
Yeah, very interesting times ahead, and hopefully more hopeful times ahead. Anyway,
Right.
onward
Well,
and upward. Good luck.
thank you, sir. I look forward to the day that we can do this in person again.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, we've got a tour in April, right?
Supposedly. I mean, I hope it happens.
It's not happening, is it?
I mean, I don't know, but I can't imagine. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe something could happen. I hope it does. I miss touring. I miss playing shows. I'd love for us to
Yeah.
do that again together, like we planned to do a year ago.
Yeah.
Um, but currently, it's not looking great with new lockdown measures and all of that. But you know, April's a ways away, so fingers crossed.
It is, yeah. And you know, like the the people who do science are doing science, and like thank God that they are. And
Yeah. And hopefully we can all start listening to them.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Right, you have a beautiful evening.
You as well, sir. See you soon. Love to the family.
Yeah, yeah. See ya.
Cheers.